So that song really is about, going deeper within and then coming to the realization of being open to God and giving everything over to God. And I chose to do that song this morning because it ties in with my talk on, are you willful or are you willing? And so what is it to be willful? And what is it to be willing? I think that it's, a common enough phrase that I think it needs to be looked at. And when you think of willful, it might have some negative connotations. You're doing everything selfishly or from the ego, or, everything's about personal gain. So then on the other hand, you have willing. And so is that being completely the opposite and being open and trusting that everything's going to work out, having faith, allowing yourself to let go and let God? Well, somebody shared with me once a visual, I need both hands, where when you're willful, you're like this. And when you're willing, you're like this. So with that visual in mind, it seems pretty clear that one way, living totally willfully, is living from our human consciousness. And then being willing is living from our divine consciousness. And I'm sure everyone can agree that living completely one way or the other is really no way to live at all. You got to find a balance. And so it's in that balance that we come to live from our divine power of will. It's not willful, it's not willing, it's both in combination, living from the divine power of will. And that's key, and I'd like to do a little bit about the 12 powers, because the power of will is one of the 12 powers. So I hope you can see that all right. The 12 powers of man is a spiritual concept created by Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder. And through prayer and meditation, he came to realize that there are 12 innate powers within each person that coincide with energy centers in the body. And if you can see here, they are will, understanding, imagination, faith, zeal, power, love, wisdom, strength, order, elimination, and life. And so with each energy center, he ascribed a disciple, that's the word I'm looking for, a disciple and a color to each of the powers as well. So what's special about the 12 powers to realize is that each power is active in your life at every moment. Whether you acknowledge them or not, they are there, they are innate, they are always at work, they exist independently on their own, they are complete and whole. They are also called spiritual truths or divine ideas. And so since you have each one of these working at all times, really everything depends on your awareness level of them. There are a couple of ways to be in awareness with them. A Course in Miracles says that you can have faith, and you can put your faith in faith, or you can put your faith in faithlessness. But whichever one you choose, it's going to be put someplace, because it recognizes that faith is there, and so it's your awareness level of faith that determines how faith shows up in your life. So the four basic levels of awareness in an unconscious way, that's, you're not aware of them, you don't pay attention to them. There's the sensory way, using our senses. There's the thoughts and feelings, which is the human consciousness. And then there's a higher level, which is our divine consciousness. And it's your own personal level of awareness that determines how each one of these powers is used at any given time. And because you're human, you have the ability to change how you use one. Just because you use one in one situation doesn't mean that you're stuck that way. You can be, let's take the power of order, for example. You can be completely OCD about something here, and you can be a slob about something here. And if you're OCD, do you realize that you're OCD? Are you, aware of that? Or if you're a slob, do you care that you're a slob? It's just depending on how you want them to show up in your life. So one good example I'd like to share with you is the idea of the divine power of love. Now, love, I like to think of it as water, because the divine power of love is about attracting to yourself. It's about attracting what you're drawn to and attracting that into your life. And so that's how the divine power of love shows up. Well, water, always takes the path of least resistance. It carves canyons, and it can be soaked up with a sponge. It can meander around things. So it always goes where it's directed, and it takes the path of least resistance. So imagine with me now that you're in a rainstorm, and you have rain pouring down, and it's hitting your roof, and you just know that it's flowing into your gutters, and it's spilling over your gutters. It's just flooding. And your yard is just a mess. You have mulch floating everywhere. And you think about the cracks in your foundation. And you think, oh my gosh. And sure enough, you have a flooded basement. I really like this when I found this. It says, this will be a wonderful day for self-reflection. And so that fits with the story, because I want you to think, about it's raining again. Let's picture that it's raining. And instead of just letting the water run wherever it's going to run, why don't we prepare for the rain? Why don't we do something? And so, why don't we put out a rain barrel? So when it flows over and when your gutters work and it fills the barrel, you harness that water. And then you can dispense of it as you want appropriately. So you can pour it onto your flower beds when you want. And instead of having a flooded basement, you have beautiful flowers. So that's what the power of divine love can be for you. You can prepare for it through prayer and meditation. And you can make conscious choices in your life about how you utilize love and how you want it to show up in your life. Or you can not tune into it, and it will show up in your life, and it could be a bad relationship, it could be fear or worry, or, it could not show up at all, the lack of love. And, it could show up in ways that you wouldn't have had it shown up had you thought about it, had you made a conscious choice. And this is true not just for love, but for any of the divine 12 powers that we mentioned earlier. So we've got to not only have the awareness to be open to spirit, which is willing, but we have to have the motivation behind it, which is willful. And so that's why the power of will is so important. Will is that decision-making, deciding, choosing, directing, divine idea that moves all of the 12 powers into action. So divine will moves everything into action. It's that divine power that moves us off of our lazy butts and gets a rain barrel out there. So in the song that I sang earlier, in Deeper, 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 I start off by saying, I am at a crossroads, a fork in the road of life. And I wrote this song with a particular big decision in mind that I was facing. And when I thought more and more about what I was doing to make this decision, I realized that I was doing everything out here. I was talking to friends, I was talking to family, I was even doing things to distract myself to not think about it. I was doing everything externally. And then I realized that what I needed to do was go within. And so I went within and I looked at it from a spiritual perspective. I prayed and I meditated about my ability to decide, because that was the problem I was having, was not being able to decide. I focused on my faculty of will, on divine will, and I became willing to release my stress and my concerns about this decision over to God. And sometimes it does take something external to happen. Sometimes well, I've heard it referred to as the cosmic 2x4, something knocking you back onto your feet to realize that you need to go within. It can be an external event. You can be busy, caught up in the day-to-day stuff and caught up in the drama of the story of what's going on, and not catch yourself being out of sync with spirit. But when you do catch yourself, when you're living from that sensory level, that human consciousness level, that's when strengthening your awareness of will is so important. It's taking that power, or whatever power have you, into meditation and concentrating on it. So Matthew is the disciple for Will, mainly because he was given a chance to give up his lucrative life as a tax collector and follow Jesus. He gave up his worldly ways, or as a metaphysician, you would say he gave up his old ideas. And yes, we're talking about Matthew. But Joshua there's a story about Joshua in the Bible, because the Bible is chock full of stories about will. And I came across the story of Joshua and found his story to be a great example. Joshua was the leader of Moses' army, and he was in charge of leading the Israelites to the promised land, or the land of Canaan. And in Joshua 5:13, Joshua was standing on the outskirts of Jericho, and he had a vision. A figure appeared before him, and Joshua didn't know where this figure came from. And Joshua said, "Are you one of us, or are you one of our adversaries?" He didn't know who this guy was, and he didn't know if he was friend or foe. And the figure replied that he was neither. He was, instead, the commander of the army of the Lord. And so our scripture here is, "And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped. And he said to him, 'What do you command your servant, my Lord?' The commander of the army of the Lord said to Joshua, 'Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy.' And Joshua did so." Any interpretation of this passage would stand to reason that Joshua saw a vision. He, came across the Lord, and being a good servant of the Lord, he did as he was told. He removed his shoes, just as he was asked by this vision. But metaphysically, we see beyond this interpretation. We see Joshua representing will. He was chosen to be the leader of the army of the Israelites after Moses because of his ability to make quick decisions, to be proficient, and to have that directive power. So he was chosen, and so that represents will. Now, the vision we see as a higher state of consciousness. We see that the vision is, in fact, Joshua's higher self. We have the commander of the army of the Israelites. That's Joshua. That's the language that the Bible uses to describe Joshua. And then you have okay, well, that's in the wrong spot. That's supposed to be above the line. Commander of the army of the Lord. But you can see the parallel between the language that is used. And so that equals Joshua's human self talking to the divine higher self. So we see Joshua representing will, and this vision representing that inner self of Joshua's divine consciousness. To continue on, it says, the sandals, remove the sandals from your feet. Or more aptly, I'd like to think, remove those barriers between yourself and your understanding of the divine. It's saying live in that place where you integrate your human understanding with your divine understanding. For the place where you stand is holy. That's representing, the knowing that spirit is always doing its perfect work. Its spirit is doing its perfect work, so there's no room for fear or adverse thoughts. There's no room for limiting beliefs, and there's no room for whatever it is that you're creating that holds you back. There's nothing in spirit that says you can't do it. There's nothing in spirit that says you're not worthy or you're not good enough. The divine idea of will says the opposite. It says, yes, you are good enough. Yes, you can do it. And yes, you are worthy. And you have the strength and the courage and the faith to put it in action. And that's what the next line in Joshua did so. That is faith in action. That is the definition of will. So back to the story of Joshua. He's standing there. The vision says, do this, remove your sandals. And Joshua did so. He didn't hesitate. He just did it. He didn't say, oh, I get it. Okay, you want me to remove my sandals. Okay, well, I'm a little busy today, so I'll remove my sandals tomorrow. How about that? No, he just did it. So this passage isn't telling us to awaken to spirit now and then put action to it tomorrow. This passage is saying awaken now and put action to it now. This passage tells us that by listening to that still small voice inside, or listening to your higher self, we have the power to take right action now. We have the power to take spirit-led action now. So the question becomes, what is it that you want to take action on? What is it that you have been questioning? What is something that's maybe weighing you down? Or, what's something that you're just trying to move forward with? Is it a conversation with a loved one? Is it a dream you haven't pursued? Is it a rut that you've fallen into? What is it that keeps you there? What is holding you back? What limiting beliefs do you have about this? What barriers, what sandals do you have about this issue? Is it that there's not enough time, that it takes too much money, or that it just takes too much energy? These are limiting beliefs that prevent you from living in your oneness with spirit, in your oneness with your higher self. So we just came out of a time of Thanksgiving where we awoke to what we're grateful for and what we're thankful for. So moving into the Christmas season, what is something, maybe one issue, maybe not, or maybe more than one issue. What is something that you want to awaken to, that you want to pursue, or you want to have some resolution over? I've had an issue in my life that has surfaced recently, and it has to do with music. That says music. So I've always been a musician, but I've had a hard time coming into my own with my music. I've had feelings about not being good enough or not being able to do it. And when people would come up to me and ask, have you recorded anything? I'd love a copy. I would think to myself, well, who am I to make a recording? I'm not Celine Dion, so, that's not for me, not for me. Or when somebody would ask me to play something, I would always preface it with getting out my guitar and saying, okay, well, I just have to say that I'm not really a guitar player, so just forgive me for all the mistakes you're about to hear. I would apologize. I would give a disclosure. And I really thought, what? This is something that's holding me back. I never thought of myself as good enough or worthy enough to put myself out there in front of people doing something that I really love. I really love doing this sort of music. And, I even went to school for music. And I did music throughout college, but see, I sang opera, and I was a classical musician. So even that thinking was a limiting belief. Because I thought if I could do something I love, which was singing opera, and I could be good at that, then I didn't need to be good at the folky guitar stuff that I just played in my dorm room. But even that was a limiting belief, and it prevented me from moving forward with my own songs and my own music. So I did my inner work, and I came to realize enough sitting around making excuses, enough making apologies for it. And I had this realization, almost like Spirit was giving me a swift spiritual kick in the pants. Spirit was saying, you've got the faith, you've got the support, now do something with it. Put it into action. And so I'd like to conclude this talk with a song that I have very proudly and unapologetically recorded. I've done something with it. Thank you. And I'm shamelessly self-promoting. But that in and of itself took a lot for me to get to that place. And so I trust that you will take this song that I'll sing during the offertory time as an example. I just want it to be an example of what we are all capable of when we listen to the power of will and we put our faith into action. When we understand the power of will and we act on it, we are all capable of amazing things. For me, it's pursuing this dream of recording my songs and being a songwriter. But for you, I don't know what it is. Only you know what that is. So think about it. And think about it during this whole time of the Christmas season. Divine will and moving forward with this action is harnessing the water in the rain barrel. Think about that. It's taking off your sandals when Spirit tells you to. It's taking action like a swift spiritual kick in the pants. And it's being willful and being willing all at the same time. Thank you.